Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. This is an educational channel. We focus on various theories of everything that have inspired me in the past and that I like to share with the people. Mostly things that are pretty obscure and that you are not likely to have heard of otherwise. Today is video number 296 that we've done on the reciprocal system of theory. And this theory was first promulgated by Dewey B. Larson in the 20th century. He came out with his two fundamental postulates in the late 1950s. And from just those two postulates, he derived a theoretical universe about how everything worked, if this, then that, and wrote books on chemistry and physics and astronomy, and also economics and some other liberal arts topics such as philosophy and religion and even biology, also psychology. Had a small following. He died in 1990, and his work was updated and revised a little bit by two particular authors, Dr. Bruce Perret and Dr. KVK Nehru. They came up with what was called RS2, the reevaluation of the reciprocal system. Stayed true to the general spirit of the reciprocal system while revising some individual errors that Larson made with his derivations. And we're going to look at an article here that was written by Dr. Nehru called The Space-Time Universe. And this is the third installment on that. So if you want to go back a couple days to start the article at the beginning. But we're going to start here in the kind of in the middle of the article, toward the beginning, I think. First, just a couple words on the reciprocal system. The basic idea is that this is not a universe of matter, and this is not a universe of energy, but this is a universe of motion. The universe is made entirely of motion, and motion is the relationship between space and time. Space and time are reciprocals of one another. They exist only together in motion, and motion is basically a fraction, with time or space as the numerator, space or time as the denominator, and all kinds of different scientific phenomena that you can think of are actually just different manifestations of motion. Not only matter and energy, but also more obviously speed and acceleration, but also force and pressure, electric current and electric charge, magnetic flux, viscosity. These are all different forms of motion, and they all can be expressed exclusively in terms of space and time, with the general caveats that space and time, they both have their three-dimensional aspects. Larson calls that coordinate space and coordinate time. They both have their aspects that are progressing. Time is always getting later and later and later, but in no particular direction. And space is always getting farther and farther and farther apart, but in no particular direction. And those are called clock time and clock space. There are also two aspects of space and time. And then space and time also are quantized, meaning that there is a minimum unit of space and a minimum unit of time, below which you do not have space or you do not have time. And if you have exactly 1 unit of space in 1 unit of time, you have the speed of light. Speed of light is what Larson refers to as unit speed. 1 over 1 equals 1. And this unit speed is basically the foundation or the origin or the midpoint or null point of this universe, the reference point. That means that half the universe is actually moving faster than the speed of light, as well as half the universe moving slower than the speed of light, which is really the only half that the legacy scientists know about. But they could extrapolate what they know about the material sector over to the cosmic sector because of the reciprocal relation between space and time. And so, space, you just have to basically invert the roles of space and time to move from the material sector to the cosmic sector. The material sector is a sector moving slower than the speed of light, and the cosmic sector is moving faster than the speed of light. So in the material sector, you have coordinate space, 3 dimensions of space, and you have clock time, progressing time, always getting later and later and later. In the cosmic sector, you have coordinate time, 3 dimensions of time, and clock space. Space is always getting farther and farther apart. These are unfamiliar relations to us, but they are the inverse of what's going on in the material sector. Okay, that's just a brief rundown. I think Dr. Nehru here will clarify some of these things as we go through this paper as well. So, we'll start from here. This concept thus leads us to the view that both space and time progress, expand continually toward infinity, and there is no progression of time divorced from an equal progression of space. However, since an increase in space is equivalent to a decrease in time, and vice versa, the expansion of space is counterbalanced by the expansion of time. Thus, space-time prior to any physical manifestation is eternal motion. This appears as expanding toward infinity when regarded from the standpoint of our human mind, which looks at the space progression in artificial isolation from the concomitant progression in time. It is this anthropocentric alienation of space and time that is responsible for a lopsided appraisal of the universe that has led science astray to its present predicament. Larson demonstrates how the emancipation from this one-sided view of the universe beautifully simplifies the physical theory, most of which is unnecessarily complicated at the present moment. Okay, so thus space-time prior to any physical manifestation is eternal motion. This appears as expanding toward infinity when regarded from the standpoint of our human mind, which looks at the space progression in artificial isolation from the concomitant progression in time. So we see the space progression in isolation from the concomitant progression in time. Okay, we'll keep going. Most of which is unnecessarily complicated at the present moment physical theory and makes possible extraordinary insights. It is not known in history to us that I think there's a typo there, but it is not known history to us. It is not known history to us that all the serious stumbling blocks that beset the progress either in philosophy or in science have been the results of treating, consciously or unconsciously, our earth, our viewpoint, or our mind as the most fundamental. It may also be noted at this juncture that in a way it is not correct to envision space and time as the primordial duality, for there is no space progression without accompanying time progression and vice versa, and no space and time per se without being treated as motion. There is only a primordial trinity. That is what Pythagoras had always upheld. In order to allay the doubts of the conventional thinker regarding the possibility of validity of the above postulates, it may be necessary once again to point out that by them Larson not only provides explanations of qualitative nature, but also arrives at the actual values of the physical properties of matter and the numerical magnitudes of natural constants like the gravitational constant, molar gas constant, or Planck's constant, etc., from theory alone. So again, Larson is able to produce receipts from this theory. He uses his theory alone to derive all of these fundamental constants that our legacy science depends upon so much. Okay, this section is called radiation. An important consequence of the progression of space-time is that unit speed, 1 unit of space per 1 unit of time, is the condition of rest in the physical universe. Thus, unit speed is not zero, is the datum level from which all physical manifestation starts. In other words, unity is nature's 0 point. This, I think, is a most remarkable discovery. Here, we should be careful not to fall prey to what A.N. Whitehead used to call the fallacy of simple location, which is to imagine, as the prevalent worldview of science does, that material particles are situated in a setting of space and time, as though matter is embedded in a receptacle of four-dimensional space-time. Larson points out that space and time cannot constitute a setting or background for motion, because motion is not a background for itself. Everywhere in a universe of motion, space and time are the two reciprocal aspects of that motion, and they have no other significance anywhere. This is where previous thinkers like Descartes, Eddington, and Hobbes, who endeavored to develop a general theory on the basis of the motion concept, have failed by not recognizing that in a universe of motion, space and time cannot have independent definitions. Aside from this ceaseless progression, the ever-present motion, a universe in the neutral condition, would be one vast domain of featureless uniformity in which nothing ever happens and nothing could happen. This gives us a fresh insight as to how we should regard the condition of pralaya. In order that there may be events or phenomena in the universe, there must be deviations from unity, a displacement, of motion from the unit level. Such a displacement is possible by the periodic directional reversal of the prevalent unidirectional unit motion in one of the three dimensions. When this happens, this periodic motion becomes detached from the ever-present background progression in that particular dimension. It now becomes a physical entity, the first manifestation. Moreover, since this oscillation has no other independent motion, it gets carried away by the background motion at unit speed in either of the remaining two dimensions. Larson identifies these oscillating units as the photons of electromagnetic radiation, the basic particles of light, with the space-time ratio of the oscillation, the number of space unit reversals per 1 unit of time, as the frequency of the radiation, and the unit velocity of the progression as the velocity of light. Thus, according to the theory, light or radiation is the first thing that emerges out of the primordial perfect uniformity, which is non-entity from our standpoint. Are not these vibrating units identical with the sound mentioned as the starting point of creation? And the secret doctrine unequivocally portrays light as the firstborn. One of the outstanding achievements of the reciprocal system is the complete and logical explanation of the dual particle-wave nature of radiation that is so intriguing. The photon acts as a particle in emission and absorption because it is a single independent unit. It travels as a wave because the combination of a linear oscillation and a translatory movement in a perpendicular direction produces a wave-like motion. Outstanding achievement number 2 of the theory is the explanation of the transmission of radiant energy without any medium, which remained without explanation hitherto. The answer here is that radiation is not transmitted at all. The photon remains permanently in the space-time location in which it originates, but space-time itself progresses, carrying the photon with it, and the photon is therefore able to act on any object which is not carried along by the progression and which are therefore encountered in rock. Okay, part 3. In the previous articles of this series, we have seen how the anthropocentric treatment of space and time has been a severe obstacle in the progress of modern science. We have then traced the new light on space and time brought out by Larson and have come as far as the genesis of light as the firstborn. We will continue with the development of the reciprocal system and see how the rest of physical manifestation unfolds. And this section is called Matter and Gravitation. We have seen that radiation arises out of the displacement of the basic motion from the 1-to-1 space-time ratio, i.e. unit speed, which is the neutral condition prior to physical manifestation. This displacement is a linear type. Now, an examination of the properties of three-dimensional space reveals that this is not the only type of displacement of space-time that is possible. even though this is the only one that can originate first from the neutral condition of space-time, another possibility is rotation. Thus, we find that the second thing manifested in the physical universe, the first thing manifested being the photon, as we noted earlier, is a rotating unit, in fact, a rotating photon. Scalar rotation differs from the familiar vector rotation of our ordinary experience in an important aspect. Scalar rotation, it is found. Now recall, scalar motion is a motion that has a magnitude, but it has no specific direction. And Larson finds this to be basically the fundamental motion. And so he's now talking about scalar motion as opposed to vectorial, or scalar rotation as opposed to vectorial rotation. Scalar rotation, it is found, involves additionally a scalar unidirectional translatory motion. Now, the caveat to what I'm saying is that scalar motion, it does have one direction. It's either in or out. Scalar motion you would envision by taking a balloon and putting dots on it. If you blew up the balloon, all the dots are moving away from each other. If you suck in the balloon, all the dots are moving toward each other. So those are the two directions it has, in or out. Scalar rotation, it is found, involves additionally a scalar unidirectional translatory motion. One can picture this as the forward movement of a rolling wheel. In fact, the theory shows how these rotating units reverse the motion pattern of free space, namely its scalar outward progression, and start moving in the inward scalar direction, which means toward all other locations in space-time. So this basically is reversing the inward and outward of that bubble. Larson identifies these rotating photons as atoms, atoms collectively as matter, and their inherent scalar inward motion as gravity. So gravity is the opposite of the progression. The progression is a given, and that it is always there. Gravity is its counterpart, but gravity only exists once you have first a photon and then that you rotate that photon. Now, this is an interesting question because I know that Nehru here just explains how that the photon comes about through an oscillating motion. Now, eventually, this article was written way back in 1981, I believe, but eventually Nehru proposes a different model of the photon called the birotating photon, and it contends that the wave-like motion of a photon, the simple harmonic motion that is like a sine wave, can also be produced from the interference between two rotations, two counter rotations. And so I'm not sure if he would revise this article or exactly why this part is still in here, where he talks about the photon being the result of reversals or oscillations. I suppose that rotations can be oscillated as well. I don't know. So anyway, back to Nehru. The secret doctrine talks of elemental vortices inaugurated by the universal mind. The material atoms are photons rotating in space. The photons themselves being linear vibratory time units. So there again, he's saying the photons themselves being linear vibratory time units. Thus, it is literally true that matter is congealed light. It is this aspect of the reciprocal system that we will have occasion to refer to when we later consider the structures of atoms and anu, as given out in the occult chemistry by Leadbeater and Besant, Charles Leadbeater and Annie Besant, as a result of their clairvoyant researches. Okay, I think we're going to leave it off right there. Now, eventually, he's going to look at, some of these theosophical works, the Secret Doctrine of Blavatsky, and then this occult chemistry of Leadbeater and Besant. And, he's writing this article originally for Theosophy magazine, the Theosophist. And so that's why he's referring to these texts. They're not important in and of themselves in the context of the reciprocal system. Dewey Larson didn't know anything about these things, I don't believe. But so they don't affect his derivation of the theory or the correctness or incorrectness of his theory. He's just pointing out that Larson's theory does dovetail with some of these other occult theories. Okay, we're going to leave it there. Thanks for tuning in. Stay tuned for episode 4 on this paper starting tomorrow. And have a great day.